2.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Secure Ranch Podcast. Uh, for today's episode for our podcast, uh, I have my first guest ever here. Meet Mr. Bob. And Bob is one of my favorite security leaders. And I've been following his articles, his contribution to cybersecurity community, etc. Um, Before going further, I would like to, uh, before Bob introduces himself, I would like to talk about Bob, his accomplishments and his work to the cybersecurity community. Bob is currently Director of Information Security at Directly. He's the CTO and Board Director at Black Girls Hack Foundation. For those who don't know what Black Girls Hack Foundation does, they provide mentoring, training, and engagement to encourage Black women and girls to be engaged in STEM fields, which is really a great initiative, to promote diversity and inclusion. He's also the mentor at Information Security Leadership Foundation, shortly called ISLF. The ISLF is a community of information security leaders focused on collaboration, education, mentorship, and the development of the next generation of information security leaders. He is also a member of Forbes Technology Council. Um, he's also a commander at U.S. Navy Reserve, and much more. I could go all day long, folks. He has his achievements. He has so many achievements. I could go all day long. So, without further ado, I would like Bob to speak about himself as well to add to my introduction note there. So, Bob, would you want to add
Hi,
more to my introduction note there?
Thank you so much, Lucas. I really appreciate this, and I am very, very glad to be here today on your podcast. I think in one simple sentence, I think I'm just very, very passionate about cyber security and the leadership. So I really would like to add value and kind of help the next generation. And I think one of my missions, something I'm very, very passionate about, is to also increase the diversity of the tech industry and more specifically cyber security. I really feel like our cyber security field should be as diverse as our nation. Thank you.
Well said, Bob. Well said. And that last word of yours will really strike a note with all of our audience. With that being said, uh, I'd like to bring up certain topics of discussion, which to which cybersecurity leaders and community leaders like you. I'd like to see what your response is for those topics, right? And
That's good.
and those topics, are more like challenges that are commonly faced by technology and security leaders across the country, across the world, and I'm curious, and I'm pretty sure all our listeners will be curious as to someone like you would be tackling these type of challenges, right?
Yes.
And I kind of morphed those challenges um, or questions, whichever way you may want to call it, into topics of discussion so that it sounds interesting. And it's just my attempt to make sure I don't bore the listeners with a very monotonous technical words, right? So wordy words. So I'm trying to make it as entertaining as possible. At the same time, more informative as much as possible, right? With that being said, with respect to topics of discussion, so first one would be, in your perspective, right? There are a lot of data breaches that are still happening, right?
Mhm.
Why are companies still, in a way, struggling? I don't want to use the word struggling, but then I want to use the word struggling because there seems to be no end to the breaches, right?
Yes.
In your perspective, why are companies still struggling to contain data breaches, despite the fact that the cybersecurity budget has relatively increased over the years?
Well, that is quite a loaded question. First and foremost, I think we all have to be humble, right? No matter how much knowledge you have, how much experience, you may think that you are the smartest person in the world about cyber, but the thing is, it is a very, very complex subject. And one thing you said is we are kind of, all of us, we are in this together, right? I remember like just 10, 15 years ago, many companies and industry leaders in our field, they would kind of like to keep their information or knowledge to themselves and not share with anyone. It was kind of like a competitive advantage, but more and more industry is sharing, again, within industry leaders, but also with the US government. Like another thing I'm doing now is I am a member of the FBI InfraGard Association, where many people in the industry in different sectors, including tech, actually share information with the FBI. And many times the FBI also gives us some notices or alert about things going on across America that they have noticed in cyberspace. And things like that, I think, is really what the future is going to be about. And kind of related to this, I am so thankful and fortunate to be in the cyber security space right now, because that wasn't my original dream, right? And when I first came to the US, my first dream was to become a medical doctor. So I was a pre-med student. I did biology and chemistry in college. And after that, I was working on my PhD in microbiology. So I am what they call the ABD, right? All but dissertation. The only thing I haven't done is an additional two years of doing research and publishing. And at the University of Alabama, I was making about $1,000 stipend every single month. So $12,000 a year. I was married and I had a baby on the way. That just wasn't gonna do it. So I still read a lot of scientific journal, but that's definitely not what I am doing full time. It's not my passion today. But all of this to say is everybody in this field, I believe, has their own unique story, right? Because cybersecurity is relatively new. It hasn't always been around like some of the other profession we have there, but it's really, I think, in the last 10 years or so, really turned into a true profession. Because when I first got into this business, it seems like it was more like a hobby, right? Something people would do on the side. So your real job would be like IT administration or database management or something, and then you would do security on the side. But now it is really its own profession. We have our own industry certs and really a lot of jobs now that still need to be filled. So in many ways, I feel like it kind of gives me job security, knowing that it's only going to get worse, and organizations are going to need people with our skill set in order to help them and prevent those breaches. Now, specifically to the question you asked, why are there so many breaches? I think there are a lot of reasons for that. In my experience, especially when I was a security consultant, a virtual CISO for a dozen companies here in Silicon Valley, I've noticed that the great majority of the firm who came to us for help to kind of lead the security function, they were really not interested in security. What they wanted was compliance. They wanted to be compliant to SOC 2 Type 2, to ISO 27000, to PCI DSS, to a specific security framework. And the only reason why they wanted to be compliant was not, well, they do say that they care about trust and privacy and security and blah, blah, blah. But really the truth is they just wanted to sell their software. They wanted to sell the software to Fortune 500 company, to the US government, to other big company who really care about security, right? So they would be receiving those 1,000 security questionnaire, and then they're like, okay, we don't know what's going on, we need help. And that's when usually my team of 3 or 5 or 6 people would come and kind of take over their security program and help them be compliant with a specific framework as dictated by the agreement they had with their prospective customers. So I think part of the reason is if we continue to just be compliant and not really care about security or elevate security to the place it should be within the organization, I believe this breach is actually going to happen. Because Target was a very great example. They were compliant with PCI DSS, and they had at the time the biggest security breach in US history. So compliance and security are really not the same. And I wrote an article on Forbes a couple of months ago about the SolarWinds. I think we found out about it the second week of December, right? I believe my article was published in January of this year. And one of the points I bring up is security needs to be elevated. I believe it is high time now for the security function to actually have a seat at the table. Whoever is leading security needs to be a senior leader in the organization that can actually impact the business strategy of the organization. This is what I have seen, especially with a lot of the startup, right? They feel like, okay, security is becoming important. Our customer need it, our client demand it, and our vendor do. So we are gonna do something about this and start a security program. But usually what they do is they only want to hire one person, not a team, but a single individual. And usually the person will be reporting to one of the VP or general counsel or something like that. And then they are responsible for the security program, but they don't really get all of the resources needed to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the data that is precious to the organization, right? So you always feel like you have so much to do, but not enough time and not enough resources to get it done. So one of the key thing, I remember when I took my CSSP back in 2009, I think it was, man, that's what, 11 years ago now. One of the main subject back then was always executive management, senior leadership has to buy into the security program, because if they don't support it, then everybody's wasting their time, right? So I think it has to start from the very, very, very top. And I believe the board now should really focus on security as well. Yes, we need to focus on business strategic initiative. We need to make money, be profitable for all of the investors and so forth, but security has to be a key piece of that. So I think it has to start at the board of director, the CEO, and all of the senior management of the organization, and whoever is leading the security function needs to have a seat at the table. They shouldn't just be told, hey, we are gonna do this. It's like, this is what we are planning to do. What is the security perspective? How can we ensure that we do it while still being secure, right? So I really believe the security function should enable business, should enable sales, but security needs to be informed during the pre-planning stage. It's not like, oh, we've already made the decision, this is what we're gonna do, and you figure out the security. So I think that is really, really important. And that's really one of the greatest lessons I've learned about this SolarWinds Act, which we are still trying to figure out exactly what the full impact of that has been in, not just Fortune 500 company, but the US government as well, including the Department of Homeland Security. So this is something that is not going to get better, I am afraid, until security has the proper strategic place within the organization. It's one thing to say that you value trust and privacy and security, but when your budget shows that you are spending most of your resources somewhere else, it kind of tells a different story. And I am really concerned about so many of our CISOs who have the title Chief Information Security Officer, but they don't get the budget, and then they also don't have the ability, the authority to actually effect change.
So thanks for the response. And one of the things that you mentioned, and I'm just going to use that as a segue into the next question, right? Mm-hmm. Will avoiding or banning, not banning per se, would avoiding usage of certain technology platforms or ecosystems, will it really help reduce the data breaches at the end of the day? I mean, is that an approach that security leaders can take at some point? Like, hey, I think this cloud service is breached often. You know what? I'm just not going to use it. Or maybe like the example, like for example, SolarWinds, right? Mm-hmm. Or someone like that. I don't want to bring up any particular vendor example, mm-hmm. but would security leaders, do they want to avoid using certain technology platforms or ecosystems that have been a gateway to these massive data breaches in the past? I mean, is that possible? Do you think that's going to happen in the future? Is there a possibility?
My opinion is it all really starts with the organization itself. I think for one thing too is a lot of the security breaches that have happened is because many of the people in the security function or engineering didn't realize that they had sensitive data in a specific server that was publicly facing. For example, Capital One comes to a mind. So I think as an organization, you need to have a security risk assessment, and you need to know exactly where is your data, what data is important to you, because you can protect everything, but like the crown jewel, the thing that you really care about, where is it located, and what controls do you have in place to ensure confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So I think the question you're asking has to be very specific to the organization, to the industry, and knowing yourself, knowing your assets, the assets that are valuable to you, the type of information that rides on those assets, and kind of what your plan is into protecting those. And sometimes, for example, this is very, very different, but the work I do in the military, it is very, very easy in the Navy, right, for security to have a high priority, right? And it's not just that we're saying that it is a priority. It's like all of the money goes into security, and it's definitely a priority from the top down. Because if we don't have that, we don't just lose our reputation. We don't just lose money, but people might actually die, right? So it is that important. And in the U.S. Navy, for example, all of the applications we are allowed to use are whitelisted. So you cannot install an application, you cannot run anything that hasn't already been assessed internally, and they've confirmed that, yes, indeed, this application is secure enough to run into our network. It meets our minimum security requirement. So having a program like this where you vet third-party vendor, this takes me back again to the Target issue, right? Technically, there was really nothing wrong with Target, but it was one of the vendor they had that the hacker used as a gateway to then access their network. So vendor security assessment, risk assessment, very, very important. Knowing your vendors, knowing what data they have access to or potentially have access to, and then again, knowing what type of controls you have in place to prevent them from becoming an issue, and then being the cause of you not being on the front page of the New York Times because there was a data breach. So you really have to have, I believe, a very strong governance in place, having security policies, processes, security assessment, and knowing the type of data you have, data classification policy, and knowing where the data is, and then coming up with a game plan to protect the data within your environment. This way, if you are using a cloud infrastructure, everybody is moving to the cloud now, whether it's AWS or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud or whatever it is, then it doesn't really matter, because you have a plan, and it's a shared responsibility model anyway, right? Like the cloud vendor like Amazon or Microsoft would usually protect the infrastructure, but it is your responsibility to protect the application that is running on that infrastructure and the data. So again, in many ways, I really feel like in our industry, we kind of need to go back to the basics. We need to do blocking and tackling and really coming up with a plan that makes sense for the organization, that also takes into account the risk appetite of the organization, right? In Silicon Valley, where I live, we have plenty of startups, and those startups usually have a very, very high tolerance for risk. That's why they make a whole bunch of money. High risk, high reward. But of course, when you live in an environment like that, a lot of things could be going wrong too. So as a security professional, you just want to make sure you have those guardrails. And again, you don't want to say no to the organization or no to the business, but find a way to be aligned with the strategic initiative of a business, but still being secure, having the controls in place for those, again, the data that matters to you. I hope that kind of answers the question. I really don't believe there is like a silver bullet, right? You have to do the work. You have to understand the business. I wrote another article for Strictures. I think it was published in February, where I talk about how a security function can really work well in an engineering-centric organization, right? Because engineers, especially in Silicon Valley, we usually use the agile methodology, and most of the companies, dozens of companies I've worked for, they usually have like a 2 weeks sprint cycle where they keep publishing code. Prior to coming to Silicon Valley, when I was working for the US government, I mean, it would take us, I don't know, 3, 6, sometimes even 9 months to publish new code. But in Silicon Valley, it's like code deployment is at the speed of light, really, at the speed of thought. It is really crazy, and it's really a challenge to publish code so quickly and then making sure that the code is secure. But anyway, there are a lot of things you can do there to try to manage the risk. But I think what it comes down to is how effectively are you managing the risk for your organization? And sometimes your risk assessment will tell you that, no, you cannot use this software, you cannot use this platform for this organization at this time because of X, Y, and Z. So I think it's really dependent on the org.
Yeah. Well, that being said, you know, there are multiple cybersecurity domains, right? In your perspective, are security leaders, are they focused on only one particular domain, and they're kind of not inadvertently ignoring or giving less importance to other domains? Like, for example, um, are there security leaders that are giving more importance to, let's say, DevSecOps, and are they giving less importance to something like incident response or security operations in general, right? Are you seeing that trend? Are you seeing that trend where you know they're not giving equal importance to all the cyber domains?
Yeah, I think part of the challenge being a security leader for an organization today is we don't have unlimited resources, right? In my own experience, really the only organization where I felt like there was unlimited support and resources is in the US Navy, and it's because we have to, right? In the real world, we have limit on how much we can spend. So you kind of have to prioritize your initiative, your task, and then sometimes even once you prioritize them, you have to prioritize them again, right? What your objective and key results are, because you just cannot do everything. That is just not possible. You have a limit on how many people you can hire and how many experts and specialists you can have on your team. The ISC Square, I've been volunteering for them since I got my certificate. So it's been 11 years now. I actually helped them with some of the question on the CSSP exam, and I do believe it is the gold standard for security professional today. They enlist about 8 domains, and we used to have 10, and now it is 8. Like security and risk management is a big one. Asset security is very important. Security, architecture, and engineering. Communication, network security, identity access management, security assessment and testing, security operation, and software development security. So I think you really have to have a comprehensive security program that will include all of the domain. Now, each one of us, like I say, we all have our own story. We have different background, and even to earn the CSSP, for example, you have to be an expert in only 2 of the 8 domains. You don't have to be an expert in all of them. So each one of us, we have our strengths and our weaknesses, and that's why this is a team sport, right? It's not just one rock star who's going to be doing everything. So you kind of need to know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then be able to hire the people or train into the area where you may not be so strong, just to ensure that all of the domains are covered. But sometimes, this is the real world. We have real realities here, and budget is a concern, especially with COVID-19. Many companies almost had to go bankrupt or lay off some people and things. So it is a challenge that needs to be managed. But in my opinion, the security risk should be managed the same way a business would manage financial risk, business risk, and all of the other risk to the organization. So it should really be at the same level. So yeah, I believe it is a challenge, but we really need to come up with a defense in-depth approach where we don't just rely on a few specific control or some key things in 1 or 2 domains, but really try to have a comprehensive view of the organization, what we do as a business, how we make money, and how security can partner with a business in order to make it happen in a safe and secure way.
Well said. So moving on to the next one. So this is more. So this is more geared. This is one of my favorite questions, right? It's not that other questions are not my favorite questions, but this question is my favorite question is because uh, this is one of those questions I got in like, oh, why can't we do this, right? It's one of those moments which which you get right from out of nowhere, right? So, given the current state of the internet, right? Given the current technologies that are available, like blockchain, you name it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Would it make sense to separate the internet based on what it is used for? Like, for example, industrial internet, consumer internet, B2B internet, B2C internet, consumer internet, like for example, industrial internet has no point or no requirement talking to maybe like for example B2C internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So would it make? I mean, would that make sense in terms of reducing the amount of data breaches, or is it too far fetched, or am I having too many dreams?
Well, I think that's actually already in place in the U.S. government. For example, in the Navy, we have what we
Right,
call NIPRNet. It is
right,
outside of the internet, and it is a public network that is accessible only to DoD personnel. I cannot access NIPRNet from my home. I have to go to the base and use one of those secure computer to get access. So it is technically, physically, logically separated from the public internet. So that is already in place, and that works. And we, in the government, for example, we have a network where that are even classified, where they have classified information completely separate from the NIPRNet and so on. So I think there are already some organizations that do that, and it kind of makes sense for them just because of the risk in the public internet, right? And but even for those who are using the public internet, you can always blacklist certain IPs and sites that you do not want your employees to go into. For example, if 100% of the business you do is in the US, you don't have any business with anybody in Europe or China or Russia or Iran or anything like that. And you know, in the news, we know exactly what are the countries that usually support, you know, nation state and do all of the hacking. You can actually just block all of their IP list. That is something that I was, for example, doing when I worked for the US Army at the Defense Language Institute. So they were on NIPRNet, but because of all of the security restriction, they couldn't do their mission properly because all of the language side that they would go to, for example, they would be blocked because of security issue, but they need to teach those languages, so they need access. So they decided to get out of NIPRNet to come into the .edu domain, which is the public internet. And I was one of the architects at the time to try to design a secure network for them to do so. And one thing we did a lot would be blocking a lot of the IPs from certain areas because we didn't have any business with people there. Where if you are in one of those countries and you try to access any of our site, any of our domain, you will be blocked and it just wouldn't work. So I think there are many things you can do, and I think that's actually a pretty good idea. And more than likely in the future, I think we can keep on dreaming, and that's probably going to be possible. I think it's going to come to a point where people are just not going to be able to trust the public internet because it is too dangerous, right? Me personally, one of my mission is to live and work on cyber, right, in a safe and secure way, because there is just way too much danger. So I think as an individual, there are certain things you can do, you can put in a place to be as secure as you possibly can and kind of reduce your chances of being hacked. And organizations need to do the same thing for the business, for their customer, for the data that is really important to them. But I think more and more we see collaboration within companies in the same industry, and even more now, like I mentioned, the FBI InfraGard with the industry and the government. Because no, the truth is we know exactly which people or countries or where most of this hacking is coming from. There is no doubt about what the origin is. So what are we going to do about that? So yeah, I think it's all about managing risk. And I think it is going to take a lot of willpower. I think we need to come to a point where the people are just going to be sick and tired of all of these data breaches and of being hacked, of being insecure in cyberspace, and then they're going to demand that companies are going to demand that their local government do something about it. I think at that point we are going to see some real changes. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I really hope we see that getting to that point. Moving on to the next one, I want to go a little bit off topic, not really off topic, but still, still tied to security, right? I would like to call it security's favorite twin sister or security's favorite twin brother, right? Nothing. It's nothing but privacy. It's called privacy,
Yes.
right? So, where do you think, in general, where is privacy headed? I mean, is it we have ton of laws, right? We have state privacy laws, we have international laws, and we have all sorts of multiple laws, right? Regulations, whatnot. So, are we headed in the right direction? Are we not headed in the right direction? Also, should privacy office come under security leaders like CISOs? What do you think? What was your perspective on that?
Well, I think privacy is definitely the twin sister of security. I remember, back in the 2000, it's kind of when security became very, very sexy. Everybody wanted to get into security, and it really was extremely popular. And I feel like privacy is in that stage right now, right? So as a security professional, I am not exactly a privacy expert, but I design the security control that will ensure the privacy, right? So there is definitely a lot of overlap, and pretty much all of the jobs I've had leading security for Silicon Valley company, I've had to work with a general counsel and collaborate with him or her to, again, ensure that the security controls we had in place would ensure privacy. So I think privacy is definitely here to stay. My personal opinion, I feel like many other countries take privacy much more seriously than the US does. Like GDPR is a great privacy law. I believe it was May of 2018. It pretty much kind of turned the world upside down for Americans who really didn't care much about privacy, because in May is when they started the enforcement. Like up to this point, really, in America, I think one of our issue is many companies like to get PII or personal data in order to do marketing, like to sell to you as much as possible. You even do like a Google search about something, a car or whatever, and before you know it, you're going to be seeing that ad in Facebook, in Gmail, and everywhere online to go. They are tracking you, and they want to sell you stuff. That is why they need your personal data. So they usually do not really care very much about your privacy unless they have to. Like in California now, we have the privacy law CCPA, which is pretty much aligned with GDPR, kind of enforcing these privacy restriction on businesses and ensuring that California residents have the right to privacy. Now, I am not a lawyer, but I'm always interested in where law and cybersecurity kind of intersect. But some of my lawyer friends are telling me, potentially even the US Constitution probably has something to say about the privacy, but it's not explicit, right? They don't just come out and say that you have a constitutional right to privacy, although I think that could be inferred. But the thing is, right now in America, I believe we need real power. We need the people's house, Congress, to really come together and come up with a federal privacy law, right? I guess we have the Privacy Act of 1984, I think it was when it came out just for the US government, but we need one for the entire country, including industry. I mean, it is time to do it. But again, it is one of those things I don't think it's just going to happen. by itself. I think security professional and individual consumer, they really need to demand that from their government. And I think when it becomes very, very costly for businesses to get breached, right? When it is going to be so costly for them to neglect or do the due process in regard to security and ensuring privacy. And I think that's when things are going to start changing. Just a simple example, what is that happening with GDPR now? They've already started finding a lot of big tech companies, right? And they say up to 2% of their global revenue. So that is something that has really teeth to it when it can be enforced. And I think that is going to kind of help lead us into the right path for privacy, not just in America, but around the world. But it seems to me like we are definitely heading that way.
For sure. We would need a countrywide privacy law for sure, just like something like GDPR, as you said.
Yes.
I really hope we get something like that sooner than later, right?
Absolutely.
With that being said, I would like to focus specifically on one of the cyber threats. It's been around for a while. It's still there, and I'm pretty sure it still will be there in the future, right? I think it has changed its shape and form, right? Of course, I'm talking about malware, and malware has gotten worse over the years, needless to say, right? What, in your perspective, what can we expect next in terms of malware-related threats? How is it going to look? How bad is it going to be?
Well, I can tell you one thing that kind of keeps me up at night right now is quantum computing, right? I think we are probably 5 years or less away from it really being a reality. And when that happens, I mean, just now think about the computing power that the bad guys are going to have to be able to break into secure system. But of course, and when you look at on the other side of the same coin, hopefully security professionals are going to be able to use the same to fortify their defense. I remember the time where malware viruses and were pretty much specific to Windows system. I even remember in the early 2000s when some security professional would say, for Linux computer or Mac computer, Apple computer, you don't really need an antivirus or anything like that because there are absolutely no malware for those. But just as soon as Apple started becoming very, very popular and started to be included into enterprise computing, we saw the number of malware specific to Apple computer, for example, increase significantly. So I feel like it is always going to be a problem. It's kind of like this cat and mouse game, right, between security professional and hackers. They come up with malware, and the way we've done it traditionally is it's signature based, and then we come up with a solution. But then they're gonna come up with a variant, and we keep trying to keep up. So I think as far as defense, what the future should looks like is really using heuristic, right? Not just the specific signature of a specific malware or virus, but actually looking at the behavior, what normal looks like in your network. When this computer is working normally, what does it look like? And if anything deviates from that now, if, for example, we see that at 2 a.m. in the morning when the computer is usually not being used, there is like a whole bunch of data that is exfiltrating from your system into a server in China or Russia or something. Okay, this is very, very abnormal. Where else is that happening? So I think that type of technology using machine learning and artificial intelligence, and we are pretty much there now. I think that it's going to be a game changer. But the only thing is, again, we come up with all of these solutions, and the bad guys are not sleeping and giving up. So they're gonna come up with other threats, and I have job security. That's all I can say. But it is not something that is going to be solved easily. But again, I like to go back to the foundation, to the basis being to protect against all of those threats. The security function really needs to have a strategy, right? You need to know your organization. You need to know what you are vulnerable to. You need to know what is important to you, and then you need to have a plan. So it's better to have a plan and kind of work towards your plan than to just put out fires everywhere and not really have a specific guidance into whatever protection defense you have in place to protect the organization.
Yeah. For sure. I really hope we keep on improving strategy to mitigate whatever malware comes in the future, right?
Yes.
So with that being said, moving on to the next one, I think you touched a little bit on this cloud service providers and what they're doing and what they're not doing earlier, right? In one of the earlier questions,
Yes.
and I just want to dig more into that. Um, do you think, in your perspective or in your experience, or service providers? I mean, let's take cloud service providers as an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are these cloud service providers doing enough as gatekeepers in terms of security and privacy, or are they just dumping their responsibilities on their customers to fend for themselves in the name of shared responsibilities, right? So what are they? What's going on there?
That is a good question. I think many of them are doing the very best they can, and they definitely own the infrastructure for sure. But if you are like, for example, I was working for a company called Pivotal in 2014, and we had a cloud platform we called Cloud Foundry. So it's a platform that would run on top of the infrastructure, whether it was AWS or VMware or Microsoft Azure or whatever. And then our client would then run their app on top of our platform. So the infrastructure, like whether it's AWS or Microsoft, they would definitely have responsibility to making sure the infrastructure is secure. Us, as the cloud, as the platform provider, we also had the responsibility to make sure that our platform was secure. But then our customer who run the application on top of our platform would definitely have responsibility to ensure that their data and their application was secure, right? So we can't do everything for them, but then we definitely have to make sure we are doing what we're supposed to do as far as in ensuring the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of our platform. And then our infrastructure partner, whether it's Amazon or Microsoft, IBM, or whomever, would do the same for the infrastructure. But yeah, I kind of see what you mean. Sometimes it kind of seems like we are leaving the consumer or the customer on the platform that use the cloud kind of on themselves, kind of trying to fend from themselves for security. One thing I've seen a lot of those cloud providers are doing better and better is really having white papers and knowledge management documentation to actually tell you what you should do, how you can improve the security posture of your application or your platform on their cloud. So I think that is definitely heading into the right direction. But ultimately, I think the responsibility relies with the organization that has confidential data or data they care about on their application on whatever platform or infrastructure. Because even to the point where you're going to decide which infrastructure provider you are going to go with, I mean, you have to do a lot of research, do your due diligence, and really understand what your responsibilities are, what theirs are. So it's not just about money, right? It's not just how much it is going to cost, but kind of have the big picture. What is the risk to you, to the application you're going to be running, and then the data running on that application. So it is really truly a shared responsibility. But I think ultimately the organization that has the application and the data they care about on the infrastructure or platform is really ultimately responsible for the security of that data and application.
Indeed, Bob. Ultimately, the organizations need to take care of the responsibility They can just delegate, but then their responsibility to make sure the data is secure at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right? Uh, with that being said, moving on to the next one, and this is also one of my favorite questions. Um, and from a perspective of diversity and inclusion, right? Um and applying diversity and inclusion to cybersecurity skills gap or cybersecurity uh, gap in hiring, right? There are a lot of cybersecurity openings out there, right?
Mhm.
Um, 500,000 plus, if I remember correctly, on top of my head, right? I mean, do you see diversity and inclusion being equally applied to fill this gap, right? To fill the gap in cybersecurity hiring or cybersecurity skills.
Yeah, this is a very important question and something I am quite passionate about. Actually, I'm going to have an article published next month, actually next week, in the U.S. cybersecurity magazine about diversity and inclusion, specifically in cyber security. Last week, I was featured on a Forbes article just about diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was across the board, but of course, my focus is in tech and cybersecurity. I think we have a lot to do. According to IC Square, it's actually there are about 1.2 million jobs right now in cybersecurity that are unfilled. They cannot find people with the skills to do them. And I think we had about 2.8 million professional as of last year or a year and a half ago. That's why I say no. This is the job of the future. Those who have skills in cyber, I mean, they're going to be gainfully employed for a very, very long time. And I think part of the well, I think there are many things that come into play here. One is our education system. That's another reason why I really, really like to encourage young people to get into STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math. I think that is very, very important, especially women and minorities who are underrepresented in technology across the board, right? The last statistic I saw, like in America, for example, I think it's almost like 51% of the people here are women. There are more women than men, but in technology, it is only like 10%, like 12% women. That is really incredible. And when you go, for example, for Black people, African American, we're about 12% of the population, but there's only 2% in tech. I mean, this is like a huge gap. And I believe for the Asian Pacific Islander, it's only 10%, and for the Latinx, Latino, like Latina, only about like 1.7%. So there is definitely a lot of work we need to do. I know big tech, Silicon Valley, we've been really tracking was diversity, equity, and inclusion number around 2014, 2015. That's around the time I came to Silicon Valley. We've done significant progress, I think, in hiring more women, but as far as ethnic minority, we haven't done very well at all. So I remember myself when I got into this field back then, it was mostly male and mostly white, right? And one thing I do personally, and this is what I really encourage every tech cybersecurity hiring manager to do. When you get a bunch of resume you are hiring for a position, I think you need to remove the name of a person, blank it out, and just look at the experience, the education, certification, and what this person can do. Doesn't care if their name is John and you think, they may be white and living in San Francisco, or their name is a name you cannot pronounce, and you already have some type of unconscious bias against the person from the get-go. So I think that is very, very important. And I have always, every time, like I started hiring staff when I was at the University of Alabama. That was back in 2003, I think, 2002 to 2003. I started hiring people, but I've always made an effort to look for qualified people across the board, right? Like I say, women are grossly underrepresented in our industry. And for the most part, they're actually much more educated than the majority of men. They have more degrees, but we just don't give them a chance. We don't give them an opportunity. So I think we have to actively work against that bias. The latest Forbes article I published, we talked about a couple of things we should do for D&I. One, if it's important to you, you have to track it, right? You have to have some measure in place, because if you don't measure it, if you don't track it, it is never going to happen. So I think that is a very, very important thing to do, because whatever gets measured always gets done. So that is important, and I think they also needs to be a focus in not just DE&I being the job of HR, which in many companies, it's the vice president of HR, people in places, that is their responsibility. It should really be the responsibility of everybody at the leadership position in the organization, all the way down to the hiring manager. I think that is very, very, very important. For example, in the Navy, we have a very good program. Again, it is not perfect, but it is working pretty well. I think the military in general is probably one of the most diverse organizations in the United States, where everything is really based on merit, but you really want to present opportunities on a playing field, so that everybody, regardless of their race, their religion, national background, and so forth, they really can advance and move up the ladder if they have the skill and if they have put in the work. So it is something I believe we are still going to be focusing on and working on, but I feel like things are getting a little bit better than they have been in the past. And I think during this pandemic, two specific things that happened that make this even more critical. It was back in June, right? July of last year, what happened with George Floyd, and then most recently with all of this Asian hate and killing. It's kind of waking people up that no, everybody needs to have a seat at the table, and every human being needs to be treated with dignity and respect, and everybody should have a chance to pursue their dream and have an opportunity to contribute. One last thing I'm going to say about this, for example, I remember when I first got into this field, right? It's kind of like, I guess they call it catch 22. I would apply for entry-level position in IT, but all of them would tell me, well, for us to give you this position, you need to have experience. Okay, I'm like, that's very nice, but how in the world am I going to get experience if nobody ever gives me an opportunity, right? So it's like you are stuck, and that's part of the reason why I am a board member with BlackGirlsHack. We are trying to create opportunities, focusing on Black girls and women, so that they have ways to actually enter into the cybersecurity field and then go. But yeah, so we really need those hiring managers and those organizations to really put a focus on this and just give somebody a chance who may not look exactly like them, didn't go to their school, and didn't grow up in their neighborhood. And again, I'm going to repeat this, but the cybersecurity industry really need to represent the diversity in our country and the world.
Oh, very, very well said. I fully agree with you when you said that we have made some improvements, but there's still a lot of improvements that needs to be made in the right direction, right?
Yes.
With that being said, moving on to the next one, and I'm gonna marry these two different topics, and these two folks. These two departments love each other and also hate each other. It's a love-hate relationship and also a symbiotic relationship. And of course, I'm talking about security team and your enterprise risk management team, ERM, or sometimes it's ERM and audit teams, right? Internal audit teams. So, in your perspective, from your experience or from what you have seen out there, are security leaders fully integrated with enterprise risk management leaders and vice versa? If not, what gaps do you see from these two teams, who cannot fully integrate successfully?
Well, a couple of things about that. First and foremost, I really see the security leader being the person who kind of manage security risk for the organization or helps manage it, right? So I think enterprise risk management and security, they really need to work hand in hand. Actually, I've actually seen in smaller organizations where the head of security kind of leads the enterprise risk management as well. Earlier, I said that the security risk really needs to be treated just like any other risk in the organization, whether it's financial, technology, or whatever, right? So it really needs to be at the same level, and the senior management of the organization needs to prioritize it, and so does the board. And I think there is even a movement now. I am also a member of the PDA organization, Private Director Association, where we kind of help private board handle and tackle. I am part of the cybersecurity initiative, because again, this topic is just becoming more and more and more important. And at the board level, they need to have visibility into security. So I think as a security leader, one thing we need to become better at is to be leaders, right? I wrote another article for Strixus where I was talking about some of the leadership principles I have learned in the US Navy in becoming a commander. But I really believe that leadership is the most critical skill of the 21st century. No matter what you do today, you better learn how to lead, how to influence people. That's really what leadership is all about, and getting the job done, right? Because with all of the automation we have, machine learning, artificial intelligence, we are pretty much getting rid of all of the low skill jobs, because computers do them much better than human being ever could. But I think there will always be room for somebody who's leading, help deploy those automated system and lead people. That will always be needed. So being a security professional too, and I wrote about this for Forbes as well, is at the beginning, technical skills are extremely important, right? When you start in this field. But as you get more and more senior, I think you really have to develop soft skill and also business skills too, I believe. And the soft skill is how you are able, when you have a limited budget, to borrow a budget from another department. That's when you are able, when you have so much things to do, but you don't have enough resources, you don't have enough money, you don't have enough people, you are able to influence member of the engineering team, or the HR team, or the IT team to actually work into your security program, right? So you have to be able to work with people. It is a team effort. You cannot do it on your own. So earlier we talked about security and privacy. Then too, there is a lot of overlap, and security needs to be really aligned with privacy. So security should be aligned with the enterprise risk management function. We really need to work hand in hand and kind of look at the big picture and try to reduce risk for the organization.
Oh, well said. So, and I really hope, and this is also one of my favorite questions or topics to make some jokes about, right? Like, the interaction or the intersection between security leaders and enterprise risk management leaders, right?
Yes.
And I personally have been in conversation, uh, you know, um, in those meetings where it's always interesting, when you listen to one side, listen to the other side, but I think the best that I've worked that I've worked has worked when they both come together.
Yes.
And as you said, they need to understand the risks as business risks, and not
Yes.
just security risks or privacy risks, or
Exactly.
something else, right? So, and I fully agree with you on that, Bob. So with that being said, I have my last and final question, at least with the ones I had put together, right? So, one of the basic things, one of the basic topics, I think you kind of hit that earlier, right? In one of your responses earlier. Um, is security and privacy by design a myth or reality? I mean, see, I personally, in my experience, I had hit and miss, right? And I would like to really hear from you as to what do you see? I mean, do you really see security and privacy by design happening? everywhere, or it's just theoretical? No one really follows it, right? So what do you see in your personal experience or from what you have heard from others?
Well, I should say that it should be by design. And many, many,
Right.
many companies say that it is, but in reality, like I said earlier, it really isn't, because the board, senior management doesn't really support it as much as it should be.
Right.
Um, Especially when you work for an engineering-centric organization where the main objective is to produce code as quickly as you can. They focus on functionality and selling their software to make money. Security is not always at the forefront, but it should be, right? Um, so security by design, no, theoretically, no, that's the textbook answer. That is what should happen. But does it actually happen most of the time in reality? Maybe, maybe not, but it should, right? It should. So I think as a security leader, like we said earlier in the previous segment, one of the area you really need to become very good at is leadership, influence. So you have to influence the head of engineering. You have to influence the head of product management. You have to work with everybody else across the organization to ensure that security is kind of baked into the process and not bolted on after the fact, right? Because what usually happens is they just go ahead and do whatever they want, and then at the last minute, oh, what about security? Let's see if we can fit it in, right? You want to start at the very, very beginning when you are still planning whatever it is, the architecture of the platform, and making sure that you have security control in place from the very beginning. So the security team needs to be involved at the infancy stage of the project, not when the project has already been published, is publicly available, and now we have some serious problems. So in engineering-centric organization, I think I mentioned that before. I wrote an article about it for Strixus, but one thing I mentioned there is initially, especially when you kind of late to the game, I think the most important thing you can do to manage risk is to ensure that you do a bunch of red team exercises. Basically, you want to hack yourself as quickly as you can, as often as you can, to find those vulnerabilities and fix them before the bad guys do, right? Pen testing is a great thing to do. Now, if you are compliant to whatever security framework out there, almost all of them say to do it once a year, but you don't have to do it just once a year. You can do it twice a year. You can do it 4 times a year, like every quarter. You can even do it every single month. There is a company I work with that's very good, that pretty much does automated web application pen tests. You can do it every single day if you want to, or maybe align it with your sprint. So things like that, where it's you that is doing the testing to ensure that you find all of the vulnerabilities and that you may fix them on time before somebody else does. Another thing you can do in many of the organizations I work for, we have like bug bounty program, right? Where we give awards, we give money to security researchers around the world. We invite them to come into our sandbox and test our software. And if they find high vulnerability, we pay them money, and then we go ahead and fix those kind of things. So program like that, I think, to get started is very important. But eventually, when you talk about security and privacy by design, what you really, really want to do is shift security and privacy all the way to the left. So all the way to the developer. When the developer develops the codes, you really want that code to be assessed for security vulnerability right then and there before it is merged into your code repository and then published. So that is really the strategy. That is really what should happen. And sometimes in some organizations, there is a lot of politics. And again, that's why you have to be a leader and learn how to influence people and kind of have them look at the big picture, but also have at least one member of the senior executive team that is going to have your back and support you. Because if senior management doesn't support what you are doing, then people are just going to ignore you, unfortunately. In many ways, I've seen my job as a security leader more as a consultant, really, right? I give advice. I tell the organization what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, and where they can improve. But ultimately, the business unit is the one that is going to make the decision, because it is their product, it is their line of business. But to that point, the last thing I'm going to add is I document all of those findings, and I am very much willing to transfer the risk, right? Okay, on this date at this time, I told you this was the risk and you should take care of it, and you decided you are not going to do anything about it. So this risk goes from the security function to the business function now. You own it. Anything happen, don't fire me. I'm not going to be polishing up my resume looking for another job. I told you about it and you did absolutely nothing about it. So I think that's an approach that seems to be working, and if eventually, once it's prioritized again within the organization, all of the other priorities that the people have, you kind of want to have a security program that is really at the base and that is consulted before an initiative and the project is approved. I think that is really the best way to win the fight, thinking about security first and not at the very end when everything has already been done and it is a fait accompli. I mean, again, that's easier said than done, but that's really where we should be.
Thanks, Bob. I just wanted to, add a quick one to that topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
When someone says, I mean, well, I feel like there's a common misconception, right? When someone says or asks security and privacy by design, right? That sentence in itself, security and privacy by design, I think it kind of resonates different things to different people, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, someone who is more into DevSecOps, right? They might think, oh, now we're talking application security. Now, if you say the same thing, security and privacy by design, to to a security operations center guy, or a or a SOC guy, or a girl,
Mm-hmm.
they might they might have a different thought, right? If you speak
Yes.
to a security risk person, so security compliance or a governance person, that sentence, security and privacy by design, means something else. And I'm still talking within the security team.
Mm-hmm.
That one simple sentence means different things to different people just within the security team, right?
Yes.
Uh, and to me, honestly, I feel like that's a gap. It should not, well, it could resonate into different things, but then at the end of the day, it needs to be one, right? Within the team or outside the team. Do you see gaps, in terms of, the perception of what security and privacy by design really means from within the team and outside the team?
Yeah, I think one of the issues we have right now in cybersecurity and in tech in general is language, right? We don't all speak
Right.
the same language. And also many times, especially when you get sales and marketing involved, they start using, well, like right now, for example, cybersecurity is really, really sexy. Everybody's talking about it, but it has different meaning to everybody because it's
Right.
so popular. Whatever they have, it has nothing to do with cyber, but they're going to say cyber, sell. So
Right.
yeah, that is definitely a problem. This is also another reason why earlier, I think I mentioned for a cybersecurity leader, you really need to understand the business. And that's part of the reason why I decided to also get a Master of Business Administration, right? Because security is a function of the corporation, of the enterprise, and it has to be very much mindful of the business of the organization. So I think it is high time that we stop speaking so much jargon, technology speak, and really speak in such a way that a business person would understand, a senior executive would understand, and a technical person would understand just the same. I think we definitely have a lot of work to do with that. And this one specific example you choose with security and privacy by design, yeah, you are correct. It will mean all kinds of things to different people. But I think the bottom line, probably what's most important in my opinion, is to get security involved no matter what, because security and IT are really some of the few functions out there that pretty much touch everything across the organization, right? When I do security for my company, it includes facilities, physical security, it includes IT, it includes HR, how we hire people, the background check, that kind of thing. It definitely includes engineering and DevOps, how we developed software and software development like cycle. It includes programming. It includes pretty much every single department in the company, including sales too, right? Because when we are trying to sell our software to potential client, they want to know that they can trust our software and we're gonna have enough security controls in place to ensure the privacy of their data. So it touches every single function in the company. So I think for a start, we really need to have that collaboration, have again, leadership is what's going to allow that across the company. Because as a cybersecurity leader, I really see myself as an evangelist, right? I am here to kind of motivate people and to tell them about security, increase awareness across the entire organization, but really get everybody to come consult with my function before they start anything, not after they've already decided what is going to be done. So security has to have a seat at the table and know what is the roadmap, what is going to come in, and then we start to think of, okay, how can we do this securely? But you are absolutely right. There are definitely gaps, and I think things are getting a little bit better now. But we need to have a very clear understanding of what is expected. But really, the bottom line for me is please get security involved early and often. That's going to save a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's a good bottom line statement, right? Like when someone says security and privacy by design, as you were saying in your final statement, involve your security and privacy teams as much as early as possible, right?
Yes.
And then that needs to resonate with business.
Yes.
With that being said, Bob, I think those were the topics that I wanted to cover with you today.
Okay.
And I'd like to know if you wanna add anything as a topic of discussion in general. Any gaps do you see, or anything else? Any other topic that you like to bring up? Um, I'm curious if you'd like to bring up any other topic.
Yeah, I think for me, probably one of the most critical thing I've seen for all of the organization I have worked for, especially when I was a consultant having dozens of clients here in Silicon Valley, is the security shouldn't be just compliance and a checkbox in a spreadsheet, right? I think organization, senior management, the board, at the board level really, and senior executive of the organization, they really need to take security seriously. I believe the security deliverable output needs to be tied to the compensation of senior management. Like you will not get your bonus unless you are not just compliant, but you really care about security in this way. I think unless that happens, not a lot is going to change because now, and another statement I said earlier, whatever get measured, get accomplished, it gets done. So I think on board of Fortune 500 company and corporation around the world, there needs to be at least one person on the board who can actually understand security and can kind of filter everything that comes through the board before they make their decision about how is that going to impact security, what can we do. And again, there is a trade-off, right? Because if you want to be extremely secure, you are going to lose functionality. There is just nothing around that. You kind of have to have a balance, but at least thinking about the security implication from the very beginning of a project, I think is really the way to go. So I would definitely encourage every business leaders out there to please inform yourself about security and really consider the security implication of all of the decision you make. And I think if it goes from the top down, we are going to see great progress. And yeah, we're going to be better secure and hopefully see less and less data breaches like we've been saying for so many years.
Yeah, and I think, and I hope that happens. I think it'd be a great idea if the cybersecurity risk posture could somehow be tied to the top management or the executives compensation,
Yes,
just like you're responsible. I mean, this is a business risk at the end of the day, right?
yes,
So
yes,
you're responsible to make sure the business is secure and safe, and your investors or your stakeholders don't lose money, or most importantly, cybersecurity attacks could threaten people's lives, and
Yes.
it's protecting people's lives at the foremost, right, at the forefront, right?
Yes. And it
Um,
actually happened, right, for the very first time in Germany last year when one person died in the hospital because of ransomware. That's pretty crazy, yeah. Something
right.
done in cyber actually ends up killing a human being. Yeah, it's just that serious. But yeah,
Yeah, it's definitely serious, and I think in terms of those type of life-threatening attacks, I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg. And I'm an optimistic person, but in cybersecurity, you have to be realistic, right?
yes,
And I think we can anticipate, as you were saying earlier, we can anticipate more these kind of life-threatening cyber attacks, and that's where top management needs to get involved in terms of prioritizing this as a business spend
yes,
rather than a technology spend. It's not a technology spend; it's a business spend at the end of the day, right?
absolutely.
Um, right. So as long as that culture comes in at the top, I think things will start happening in the right direction, right? Um,
Definitely
so
agree.
with that being said, Bob, I really enjoyed this conversation. I think we went through great topics, especially the subjects that's closest to you, which is very near and dear to you. Um, Integrating diversity and inclusion with cybersecurity skills gap, or resources gap, right? And I'm glad we talked about that. That's one of the topics of discussion that I really wanted to bring up today, right?
Yeah.
And other topics. Thanks for your inputs. I'm pretty sure our listeners would learn something, if not a whole lot, from your inputs and from your responses to these topics, right? So with that being said, Bob, that's all I have for today.
Great.
And
Thank you so much, Lokesh. I appreciate the invite and talking to you. Hopefully we do this again. Thank you.
Oh, hopefully. I'm really looking forward to chapter two or part two, like your Mission Impossible series or Rambo series, right?
Yes.
So I'm really looking forward to we'll
Yeah.
we'll make the topics more fun next time,
Outstanding.
right?
Yeah, as much fun as we can with such a serious subject. But yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Bob.